Hello and welcome to the FatBoss guide to Flamebender Kagraz on normal and heroic difficulty in the Blackrock Foundry.
And this fight is pretty fucking awesome. There's a lot of fire going on, there's fire dogs everywhere, there's fire weapons, fire lines, it's quite fiery.
Yeah.
It's good.
I don't know what gave you that idea.
It's very, very good fight overall. It's pretty cool. You can also get a follower if you want to go all out of your way to go and do so. But we're not going to be covering that. We're mainly going to be covering the boss and what you need to do in order to kill her.
Now, before we go into the mechanics of this fight, for this encounter you do want to bring 2 tanks. In a 10-man roster, you probably want to bring 2 or 3 healers. In a 30-man composition, you want to bring around 6 healers. And you want to bring a mixture of melee and ranged DPS.
Now, before we go into what Flamebender does, you will notice that you have got a little friend with you, some Steelbringer fella, and really, if you want to keep him alive throughout the entire encounter, if you do that, then you actually get him as a follower, which is pretty nice, but we're not doing that now.
No, fuck that guy.
Exactly. The best way to do it is just completely kill him for your first kill. He has got a couple of mechanics where he's jumping about and throwing hammers and all that kind of shit. He has like 5 mil health.
Just blow him up.
He literally explodes, so just nuke him flat out, he'll die, and then you can focus on Flamebender.
Now, Flamebender has 2 mechanics that range DPS need to worry about, and these mechanics she'll do throughout the entire fight. One of them is Lava Slash. She'll target a ranged player, dealing AoE fire damage to them, and she'll create a line between that player and herself. If you stand inside this fire line, you'll take ticking fire damage, so of course, don't stand in the fire. Rule number 1 of WoW raiding. One thing to note is that any players within 7 yards of the targeted player will also be affected by this ability, so if too many players are stacked, you'll all be doing damage to each other, and potentially, I mean, maybe there's 4 or 5 of you stacked up in one place, you'll probably end up one-shotting yourselves.
It's kind of like a chain lightning, but with lava on the floor, so
yeah.
Pretty much just remain spread out by 7 yards, and it pretty much goes off of cooldown as well, so she uses this a lot, so just do try and spread out throughout the entire encounter.
The other ability to worry about is a fiery weapon that she'll spawn, and this will always be on top of a ranged player. These weapons don't actually do anything at all, they'll just stand around and hover. However, every 3 seconds they'll spin. If you're on top of them when they do spin, you'll take a large amount of fire damage, so of course, keep your eye on them. When they spawn, move away. And if you are on top of them, make sure you're not there for too long, because they're about to spin and do a load of fire damage to you.
Now, one thing about these fire weapons is that they kind of hover around in a circular motion. Like, they don't stay in one single location. So if it does spin right next to you and you don't take damage, chances are it might just kind of hover over towards you and then slap you in the face. So do be very careful about this. Do give them some room.
Now, as you may have noticed, the boss does have an energy bar, and she will gain different abilities at different energy thresholds, and will continue to use some of the abilities until her energy is completely reset.
At 25 energy, she will start to put a debuff on players called Molten Torrent. This debuff acts as a marker on a player for a meteor that's about to land. After 6 seconds of the debuff, it will expire and a meteor will come down and hit them, dealing damage that will one-shot them. Now, you can use immunities such as deterrence and large damage reductions to kind of counter the ability, but because it can go on pretty much any range DPS, this isn't always viable. The thing is, what is intended for you to do is actually to stack up roughly around a third of your raid inside of the circle in order to spread the damage amongst players, because the meteor that lands is actually spread. The damage is spread amongst everyone that gets hit by it. Now, if you're on a raid where a third or more of your raid is actually composed of melee DPS, you can just, run into melee and let it explode on them. Because range do need to keep spread out because of the lava slash and there's fiery weapons everywhere, it can be kind of awkward for you to group up. So if you can, just lob it in melee, just roll in or do whatever you want to do just to get into melee, drop it off, it will explode and then you can run out. One other thing about this debuff actually is that with Lava Slash, it never happens at the exact same time. You normally have about 2 or 3 seconds after a meteor has landed for you to spread out for Lava Slash, so don't worry too much about it, just be quick, because if you do just remain stacked, you're just going to chain lightning all on top of each other.
Now, at 50 energy, she will summon a pair of Cinder Wolves. Now, these dogs that are spawned, they chain together like Diablo 3 champion packs, and if you do stand in these fire chains, you'll take a stacking fire dot. So don't stand in the chains. Now, one of the dogs from the outset will be completely untankable and will start fixating a random ranged player. If the dog reaches that player, it will melee hit them pretty hard and will probably one-hit them. So it's very, very important that this dog that is fixating a player, that you apply slows to it. So frost shocks, Cone of Colds, whatever the fuck you got, just keep it slow. Chill Blains is amazing for it. Now, the other dog that is active will spawn overheated. This actually makes the dog tankable, and it will also make it so the dog deals more damage, and it will also have faster moving speed, which prevents you from kiting it.
Now the overheating dog will also cast something called Charring Breath. This is a frontal cone dealing large fire damage that stacks a debuff, increasing the damage you take from this ability by 200%. Now because your tank will be tanking this, this is like a tank swap sort of debuff. Just make sure you switch on 2. The Fire Breath does enough damage as it is already, so do make sure that you do switch. And melee, don't stand in front of the dog.
Yeah, don't take the cone.
You'll go and die.
Now while the dogs are up, they will at some point during their uptime, they will actually switch. The non-overheated dog that's currently fixating a player will suddenly become overheated, and the overheated dog that is on the tank will no longer become overheated and will start fixating a player. As at this point, as a tank, you want to taunt the new overheated dog back into melee as soon as you possibly can, because you're going to have no threat on it, and potentially it's just going to run over to a ranged player and just eat them.
Now an important note about these dogs, that they do have to die within quick succession of one another, or they'll channel something called Rekindle, which will heal them both at the end of the cast to a ridiculous amount of their health. And they already have got quite a lot of health, and really their #1 priority for all DPS. Everyone switches to them, so the melee just kill the one by the tanks, and the range just killing the one that's running around trying to eat people and shit. So make sure that you do kill them at the same time, otherwise you're wasting a shit ton of it.
And do note, melee, you probably will get caught off by this fire chain at some point, because the way that the other dog is being kited around the room by the ranged, it doesn't matter if you take a couple of ticks is fine, just don't stand at it all day long. Now one thing to note, while the dogs are active, you will have to deal with a Molten Torrent, and this is the best phase to use your immunities, just so you don't have to go stack in melee. It just reduces the amount of damage and it just makes things a lot less hectic. However, if you do need to go into melee to drop it, keep doing that, that's absolutely fine.
Now at 75% energy, she will start placing debuffs on players called Blazing Radiance. Now this debuff will just deal damage to that player and all other players within 10 yards every 2 seconds. So if you got the debuff, move out of the raid.
Simple as that. Just don't deal damage to other players when you have this debuff. Now at 100 energy, she will cast Firestorm. This will deal fire damage to all players in the entire raid for 12 seconds. And one thing to note, if there are any wolves up at this point, they'll also mimic the amount of damage she does. So that could potentially double or even triple the amount of damage that's going on your raid. At this point, if the dogs are up, it's pretty much a wipe. Make sure the dogs are dead before this point, and if all your DPS focus the dogs, you should never have this problem.
At this point, you want to make sure that you do stack up and heal, of course. Healing cooldowns aren't necessarily like 100% needed, because the damage isn't huge, but say you do have dogs up and you have fucked up, you might want to use everything. But otherwise, you shouldn't need to use too much, maybe just like 1 trank or something like that. You don't need to go absolutely nuts.
So the Firestorm starts, you stack up, everyone heals up, the Firestorm ends, and then you move away and continue the fight as normal. As soon as her energy is reset, for the next 50 seconds, her melee attacks will now start applying a stacking fire dot on the tank. And it does stack very, very quick because it's literally every melee hit. For this debuff, you want to taunt roughly on 8, or just taunt as soon as your debuff is dropped.
On top of this, fire will now start bouncing out of the furnace behind her and land on players, dealing a moderate amount of damage. You can see where the fire is going to land. You've got a little swirly shit on the floor. Just make sure you move out of it to minimize the amount of healing that needs to go out.
And it's from this point onwards where really the fight just repeats. There isn't anything new to it as it keeps going. It's just really getting around the wolves. Wolves are probably the most difficult part of the fight. Just to start with, especially the tanks, you might be caught off guard by the Charring Breath. That does hurt. Really, you should try and CD every single one as much as you possibly can. But the fight itself is very simple. There's not a whole lot to it.
It's a really fucking good fight.
But it's an excellent fight.
It's really, really nice. And it's mainly to do with orchestrating your movement, especially with this meteor that comes down, because it's so dependent on your comp. Like, if you can drop it in melee, it's a really nice way of doing it, because mainly the wolves, like, but a really good point actually, if you do have the meteor on you, you won't be fixated by the wolves at the same time. Well, we haven't seen it at least, so it's highly unlikely.
We think that's the case.
So hopefully that's the case. So you can normally still drop that meteor during the wolf phase, so do it if you can. If not, you're just going to have to group up and do the best that you possibly can. But yeah, it's a really, really good fight overall.
So thank you very much for watching, guys. If this guide did help you out and made you get a kill, please do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. And if you'd like to see any of our other Blackrock Foundry guides, then please do click upon the annotations you see on your screen now, and it will shoot you straight to those videos.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.